moment finally arrived, when Donald Trump had to stand before the American people and acknowledge a painful reality. For months, the conflict had escalated beyond what many analysts predicted. What initially began as a show of strength and strategic pressure slowly transformed into a long, exhausting struggle that drained military resources, political confidence, and public support. The White House had promised quick results and decisive dominance, but the battlefield situation and international political landscape began to move in a direction that the administration could no longer control. As reports came in from military commanders and intelligence agencies, the realization grew that continuing the confrontation would only deepen the crisis rather than resolve it. Inside the White House Situation Room, tension filled the air. Advisors, generals, and national security officials gathered around the table with maps, intelligence briefings, and casualty reports. Trump, known for his confident and bold public persona, appeared unusually quiet as he listened to the latest updates. The situation had become extremely complicated. Allies were beginning to distance themselves. Global markets were reacting with instability, and pressure from Congress and international organizations was increasing day by day. The conflict had turned into a strategic deadlock where neither side could achieve a clear victory, but the cost of continuing the fight was rising rapidly. Trump's closest advisors began presenting him with a difficult choice: escalate the conflict further with unpredictable global consequences, or accept a negotiated outcome that would be perceived by many as a defeat. For Trump, the decision was deeply personal as well as political. Throughout his career, both in business and politics, he built his reputation on the image of a winner, someone who never backed down and always claimed victory. Accepting defeat in a war was something he had always criticized in other leaders. Now, however, he found himself in the same position he had once condemned. Late at night, according to people close to the administration, Trump spent hours reviewing reports and discussing options with his advisors. The military leadership explained that pushing forward could lead to a much larger regional conflict and potentially draw other major powers into the situation. The risk of global escalation was real, and the stakes had become far greater than national pride. As the pressure mounted, Trump's frustration became more visible. Reports described heated discussions in the Oval Office and moments when the president expressed deep anger over how events had unfolded. He blamed intelligence failures, miscalculations, and what he described as a lack of support from international partners. But at the same time, those closest to him said he also understood that leadership sometimes greater disaster. The weight of the presidency seemed heavier than ever, and the once confident leader appeared increasingly troubled by the reality unfolding around him. Finally, the moment came when Trump agreed to accept a negotiated settlement that effectively ended the conflict without achieving the objectives his administration had initially promised. The decision shocked many of his supporters who had expected a different outcome. In a televised address from the White House, Trump appeared far more serious and subdued than usual, standing behind the presidential podium with the American flag behind him. He spoke slowly and carefully, acknowledging the sacrifices made during the conflict and explaining that the priority now was protecting American lives and preventing a wider war. Although he did not use the word defeat directly, the message was clear: the United States would step back from the confrontation. Observers noted that Trump looked visibly upset during the address. His tone lacked the usual energy and confidence that had defined many of his speeches. Political analysts later described the moment as one of the most difficult of his political career. The cameras captured brief pauses in his speech, moments where he seemed to reflect on the gravity of the situation. For a leader who had always projected strength and certainty, admitting that the outcome was not what he had promised was an emotional and symbolic turning point. Across the country, reactions were mixed. Some Americans supported the decision, arguing that ending the conflict prevented further loss of life and avoided a much larger war. Others criticized the administration, claiming that the situation should never have escalated to this point. In the first place, political debates quickly erupted in Washington, with lawmakers questioning the strategy that led to the outcome. Meanwhile, international leaders responded cautiously, emphasizing the importance of diplomacy and stability moving forward. In the days that followed, Trump reportedly spent long hours with his advisors analyzing what had gone wrong. The administration began focusing on repairing relationships with allies and stabilizing the global situation. Despite the criticism and political pressure, Trump continued to defend his final decision publicly, arguing that preventing a global catastrophe was more important than continuing a costly and uncertain conflict. Still, those who observed him closely said the experience clearly affected him. The leader, who had built his brand on winning, now carried the burden of a moment where circumstances forced him to choose compromise over confrontation. For historians and political analysts, the episode became a powerful example of how leadership during international crises often involves extremely difficult choices. Even the most confident and determined leaders can find themselves facing